You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 50, Cubs Madness in Milwaukee. Don't forget to listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the socials. Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and Fly the W on Facebook. Of course, email Crawly and I, flythew670 at gmail.com. Well, Crawly, it lived up to the hype. The Cubs and Brewers just wrapped up north of the Cheddar Curtain. You are still up there. You went to game number 3. An exciting series. Didn't go exactly the way we had all hoped, but didn't go exactly the wrong way either. Let's get into it right away. Let's get into game 1. That goes back to what? That was July the 3rd, Crawly, right? I was broadcasting from an airport. Drew Smyly versus Julio Teheran.
Yeah, man. Sometimes you get these series that you think about, you just classic epic battles, and that's what this was. Back and forth, no lead was safe. It was a fun series. Like I said, didn't go 100% the way we wanted it to, but man, it was a crazy week of baseball. Game 1 was the one that probably frustrated me the most. The Cubs did lose 8-6. How many times have we said that this season was a tale of two games? In the Cubs offense exploded in the first 3 innings, scoring 3 in the second and 3 in the third. They're up 6-0. Bellinger, Madrigal, Barnhart, they all drive in runs in the second, and then Morel, Madrigal, and Barnhart drove in 3 runs in the third. So that's 4 RBIs from Madrigal and Barnhart at the bottom of the order.
And you've got to take advantage of that, Crawly. When you get efforts like that from guys at the bottom, those are the games you must win.
Right. And you're up 6-0. Everything's looking good. But Drew Smyly, he's really struggled, for a while now. I think ever since that perfect game that kind of didn't go his way. And it just, you got a 3-0 lead in the top of the third. That should be, plenty. But, the Brewers were able to put 3 on their own at the bottom of the third. You had William Contreras double, Christian Yelich triple, and Willy Adames single. That cuts the Cubs lead to 6-3. And then in the 4th inning, Smyly got into a jam walk in the first 2 batters, but was able to get out of it, but at a cost. With 1 out, Nick Madrigal runs into the sidewall in foul territory and, trying to get a foul ball. And, it's not going to look good. They're going to pull him from the game. And he's somebody that was really hot for the Cubs. So, that was a loss, Yeah,
and we'll miss him for sure.
So Drew Smyly was done. Fulmer came into the game out of the pen, right? Madrigal felt something in the right hamstring, and that was the same one he tore in 2021. And like we said, since being recalled from Iowa, he was hitting 325, 409, 466. He solidified that third base position, which was a struggle for the Cubs this entire season.
Right. But he made the hot list 2 weeks in a row.
Now we get into something, Dustin, that bothers me. And I felt like this game was on David Ross. Okay. He will move Morel from DH to third to take over for Madrigal. Now, here's the problem with that. The rule states that if a player serving as a DH is later used on defense, he continues to bat in the same lineup, but the team cannot use the DH. So now you have no DH anymore. DH is gone. You burned him. Instead of, say, taking Jared Young.
It's a really weird rule, isn't it?
It doesn't bother me. I think that's a fair rule, but I think that Jared Young has played first base and third base. So why wouldn't you just take Jared Young and move him to third, and then you could put anyone? You could have messed around with it a lot of way, but you didn't have to burn the DH.
That's what I'm saying. The burning of the DH seems bizarre to me. That's my point.
Right, and that's where I was kind of scratching my head with David Ross. What is he thinking? I have no idea what's going on here. So what ends up happening is Smyly leaves the game. He only went 3.2 innings pitch. He gave up 4 hits, 3 runs, 3 walks, and 5 Ks. But Dustin, we talked about this, is that when you go, when you can only go 3.2 innings, now you put a lot of stress on the bullpen. Everybody's got to look perfect for, you're talking about 5.5 innings, 5 1/3 innings,
Yep. I mean, that's got to be one of his shortest outings, right? If not the shortest so far this year.
It wasn't good, and it came at the worst time. So after the Cubs scored, 6 runs in the first 3 innings against Julio Teheran, they did nothing in the next 3 innings. You should have been able to knock him out, to go for the knockout punch. He goes 6 innings. Fulmer did a good job. He went 2.1 scoreless innings after coming in for Smyly. But here's the thing. Here's mistake number 2 by David Ross, right? Julian Merriweather came in, and he was not his best. He gave up a single and 2 walks to load the bases. Craig Counsell went to the left-handed pinch hitter, Jesse Winker, right, to face Merriweather. Perfect time to go with Mark Leiter Jr., who's been dominating lefties, one of your best relievers. Instead, he brings in Anthony Kay, who the Cubs picked up off the scrap heap in a bases-loaded situation. So Counsell brings in righty pinch hitter Jameel Jones, and, you know, what he's going to do is Major League debut, he doubles to clear the bases.
Of course,
and now the game's timed in the 6th. Cade walks the next batter and hits Caratini to load the bases for the second time that inning. Leiter was able to get out of it, but it was just so foolish. Like, you could have had Leiter in there, and then Leiter could have gone against the lefty righty. He's got even splits. So that was the huge mistake that David Ross made there. A
lot of people on social media, Crawly, a lot of places I look for Cubs content and information. A lot of people were wondering if David Ross was going to make it through this series.
It was frustrating. That was his worst game out of all of them. And unfortunately, Leiter had a bad week. He would pitch then into the 8th after he finished the inning. He gave up 3 straight singles, and the Brewers took their first lead 7-6. Owen Miller would hit a sac fly. That'd make it 8-6. The Cubs were able to get runners in first and second with 2 outs against closer Devin Williams, but Dansby Swanson strikes out to end the game. The offense scored 6 runs on 10 hits. Were 4 for 11 with runners in scoring position. But again, after the 3rd, the offense just dried up. But I really think this loss was directly on David Ross.
Well, you and I will definitely agree on a couple of things, Crawly. That one, David Ross has to wear it with the use of the bullpen. But that Cubs offense, the guys that you were definitely counting on, needed to step up. Again, going backwards a little bit in what we've already talked about. When you're getting production from Nick Madrigal and Tucker Barnhart, you've got to take advantage of that. When those guys are producing the offense for you and you're staked to a 6-0 lead, Drew Smyly also has to be a better pitcher, right? In those situations, when you're staked to that kind of a lead in a series that was statement series, must-win games, you just had to be better. You had to be better. And it really, we're going to get into game 2, but I really had absolutely no faith on the 4th of July after that one. Of course, because I work at the Score and help you work on this podcast, I was listening to Pat and Ron. I decided to be outside and enjoy the 4th of July heat here in Illinois a little bit. But that was a tough one to swallow. And again, I heard a lot of people talking, wondering if there was any chance on a holiday the Cubs might make a move with David Ross. It didn't happen, obviously.
No, and I don't think it's going to happen this year. But, he just got an extension not too long ago. It was frustrating all the way around. And then in game 2, you had Kyle Hendricks versus Wade Miley. And game 2 felt really similar to game 1. Luckily, luckily, Kyle Hendricks was on the mound, and he continues to look strong. He went 6 innings pitched, and he gave up 4 hits, 2 runs. Only one of them earned. He had 5 Ks to 1 walk. The Cubs offense, once again, early lead. They were up 4-0 through 5. Seiya Suzuki snapped an 0-for-21 slump with a triple, scored on a Yan Gomes double in the 2nd. Dansby hit a solo home run to make it 2-0 in the 3rd. And in the 5th, Trey Mancini hit a sac fly, and Cody Bellinger hit 2-out RBI single to make it 4-0. And so, everything's looking good. But just like the game before, Milwaukee starts to chip away. Bryce Terang singled to put the Brewers on the board in the 5th to make it 4-1. Then in the 6th, we had some controversy, okay? With 1 out, Christian Yelich singles. He steals 2nd. Jesse Winker strikes out. So you got 2 outs, and William Contreras is up to bat. He hits a slow roller up the first base line, and instead of staying in the runner's lane, which is kind of in foul territory, he's right on the line. And so Miguel Amaya had no throwing lane. Contreras should have been called out for interference when Amaya's throw got past Trey Mancini. The Brewers are going to score their 2nd run to make it 4-2, and Ross was upset with home plate umpire Eric Bacchus. But, the call's the call. He's not going to change it. The big difference, though, here is unlike the day before, the Cubs were able to add runs to their lead late. They scored when Miguel Amaya hit a clutch 2-out double to score Jared Young and Cody Bellinger, and it looked like the Cubs had a safe 6-2 lead going into the bottom of the 8th. Unfortunately, Mark Leiter Jr. had another bad outing, his 2nd in a row, hitting the first batter he faces and giving up a single to William Contreras, Rowdy Tellez to make it 6-3. With 2 outs, Adbert Alzolay came into the game, and Willy Adames hit a double to make it 6-4. But Alzolay got out of it. Now the Cubs lead was only 2 runs. Alzolay continued in the bottom of the 9th. He gave up 3 singles to make it 6-5, hit a batter, gave up a sac fly, and the Brewers have tied it all up again, and Cub fans are just going crazy.
And at this point, Crawly, my power has gone out. So now I'm hoping that my Alexa has gone out. I'm on the app on my cell phone, but can't watch any of it on TV. House is warming up, and I've got people over for a cookout.
Yeah, not good. Not a good situation for anyone at that point. And so, we get to the 10th. You got the Manfred man. The Cubs hit into an unlucky double play on the top of the 10th. We head to the bottom of the inning, and Ross had used Merriweather, Leiter Jr., and Adbert Alzolay. So in this critical moment, who does he call? Daniel Palencia. He was a starter last year in South Bend. They converted him this season to a reliever, climbed up to Tennessee and then Iowa, and now he's here in MLB debut in a game with huge implications, and he has a runner on second because we're in extras. After the first out, Owen Miller singled, and the Brewers decided to test the arm of Ian Happ. Ian gunned down Andrew Montecchio at the plate, and Miguel Amaya alertly threw it to second. Miller made it, but he overslid the bag, jumped back, and Nico jumped at him at the same time for the tag for a 7-2-4 double play to get out of the inning.
That was so awesome. That was so awesome. And Amaya has not been given enough credit for that heads-up play. That was a really, really heads-up play.
Absolutely brilliant. And there's an awesome photo, if you can find it online, of Nico tagging Montecchio. It's phenomenal. So, the Cubs have life again. And so Cody Bellinger starts the 11th at the top and this on second. Wisdom grounds out, but then a wild pitch moved Bellinger to third. Amaya struck out. Nico hit a clutch 2-out single to put the Cubs up 7-6. Then Dansby Swanson was up to bat, and home plate umpire Eric Bacchus forgot what the count was. Okay. He called Swanson out on strikes, even though there was only 2 strikes. First base coach Mike Napoli had some words for Bacchus. Andy Fletcher's the first base umpire and the crew chief. He tosses Napoli. Ross comes out and gives it to both Fletcher and Bacchus. He gets tossed out. Obviously Ross was upset. There's a couple bad calls, not a lot, but the interference call that was never made was Ross mad. And then the Brewers kind of played some games with the roof. You're not supposed to change the roof.
Kind of played some games.
Yeah, playing some games there. And they closed the roof. You're not allowed to do that. And so he was mad about that. So we have clips of how happy David Ross was after that game. It wasn't quite up to Lee Elia standards, but it was pretty good for Grandpa Rossi. So with the Cubs leading 7-6, Milwaukee had one more chance with a runner on second, and Palencia is still on the mound. Ramil Tapia grounds out. Owen Miller, the Manfred man, goes to third with 1 out. Then Bryce Trank flied out to Happ. They tried out Happ's arm one more time, and Happ threw Miller out from home to end the game. Dustin, how's this one? With Ian Happ recording 2 outfield assists at home plate, 1 in the 10th and the 11th, Happ became the first player with 2 outfield assists in extra innings in the same game since Endy Chavez did it for the Mets against the Giants, June 4th, 2006.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. I mean, I'm actually surprised it was that recent, honestly. Yeah. I mean, that's a crazy, crazy stat.
Right, and Daniel Palencia became the 4th Cubs reliever since 2000 to earn a win in his major league debut. The last one was Hayden Wesniewski, September 6, 2022 versus Cincinnati. But as we talked about, David Ross angry. This is the comments, and this was on Marquee. I saw this on Marquee, and I'm going, oh my God, nobody had the dump button. Who's in charge of that? So here's what David Ross had to say and what everybody got to hear.
It's 40 to close, and so it's got to be better. They're closing the roof to get rid of the shadows late. There's a lot of bullshit that went on today that just was really frustrating. I fucking thought it was horseshit. I don't fucking know.
There we go. David Ross getting a little spicy, huh?
The first real spicy words on the Fly the W670 podcast, courtesy of David Ross.
So the Cubs win, and now all of a sudden everyone's fired up. I get on. We go to a bar. We get on one of those shuttles to Milwaukee to Miller Stadium, AmFam, whatever they call it now. It's Justin Steele versus Adrian Hauser, and that was another crazy game. Again, all of these end up being tied up at the end of the 8th, 9th inning. Justin Steele looked okay. He went 6 innings, gave up 3 runs on 9 hits and 5 Ks. I thought he gave up, there's a lot of hits. In the 3rd inning with the Cubs up 1-0, Andrew Montecero singles. Steele got the next 2 out, and then William Contreras singled to tie the game. Then in the 6th, Willie Adames homered to put the Brewers ahead 2-1. They weren't done as Jamal Jones singled, stole second, and with 2 outs, Brian Anderson singled to put the Brewers up 3-1. Rucker pitched 2 innings. He didn't give up any hits, but he walked 3 batters. Can't do that. And so I'm sitting here, you're down 3-1, and you're looking at the Brewers bullpen, and you're starting to get a little nervous. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
And the Cubs had plenty of chances, Dustin, but they struggled to drive in runs. They had runners in each of the first 5 innings. The Cubs scored in the 3rd inning with 2 outs. Ian Happ singled to make it 1-0, but Dansby Swanson hit into a double play to end the threat. In the 5th, the Cubs loaded the bases with 1 out, but once again, Swanson grounds into a double play to end the inning. In the 7th, Dansby was pulled from the game with a heel injury, trying to beat out that second double play. So the Cubs have all these chances, to score some runs. They don't do anything, and now you got all-star closer Devin Williams coming into the game. So you got Devin Williams coming into the game. And not only that, Dustin, just the Cubs are not a come-from-behind team. They haven't been in a long while. And so, I'm just sitting there, I'm watching and saying to myself, let's just get it over with so I can get back home and grab a few more beers. But, what ends up happening is that Bellinger hits a single, Morel struck out, but then Jared Young singles. He had runners at first and second with 1 out. Gomes grounded out and the runners do not advance, but then Bellinger advanced to 3rd. And the Cubs were down to their final out. But then the Palatine Pounder himself, Mike
Palatine Pounder.
He doubles, and that is going to score Young and Bellinger. And it's a whole new ball game, tied game. And then Nico grounded out to 3rd, or grounded to the 3rd baseman, but Brian Anderson threw it low. Owen Miller tries to dig it out, but the ball kind of pops out of his mitt, and then he can't find where it is. And Tauchman never stops running. He scores from second to put the Cubs ahead 4-3. Alzolay came in and closed it down in the 9th. The victory marked the Cubs' first when trailing entering the 9th inning this season.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable stat there.
They are now 1-39 when coming into the 9th inning. The Cubs had lost 112 consecutive games in which they trailed by multiple runs in the 9th inning or later, the 2nd longest active streak in the majors.
Unbelievable. I didn't think they had a chance, but God bless the fact that they did win that one. I absolutely loved Alzolay's reaction. I mean, unbelievable reaction to getting that save. And that was a big moment. And hey, it was also, you could have seen David Ross maybe not wanting to give him that opportunity again, right? After what had happened earlier in the series. So good that he went back to the well. Not that he's got a ton of options, but I just absolutely loved his reaction winning that game.
You want to get a bounce back after, he struggled the night before or the day before. And so, it's good. I was happy for him. Sometimes it works out like it did with Alzolay, and sometimes it doesn't, like it did all week with Mark Leiter Jr.,
Right. Mark Leiter Jr. not exactly looking forward to a trip back up to Milwaukee. I don't think anytime soon.
No, that takes us to game 4, and I'm feeling good, right? The Cubs up 2-1. You got your ace on your mound, and then, Devin Williams is totally burned up. He threw, I forget how many, over 20-some pitches in that inning. So you got a feeling that you're not, even if it's a close one, which you kind of knew it would be, you wouldn't have to see that guy. Marcus Stroman was cruising through the first 4 innings, but the wheels fell off in the 5th. Ramil Tapia singles. He steals second. Stroh strikes out Brian Anderson, but then like a key sequence with former Cub Victor Caratini happens. He's at the plate, and Marcus gets ahead of him 1-2 on that second called strike. Caratini begins arguing with the ump. No, that pitch was no good. Arguing about the pitch. It gets to a 3-2 count, and Stroman throws a pitch even better than the one he got called on strike 2. But the umpire is going to call it a ball, and so Caratini walks. Brian Terang would fly out, but that would have been the 3rd out of the inning. But instead, because of that walk, Joey Weimer singles. The game's tied at 1, and then the resurgent Christian Yelich hit a 3-run homer to give the Brewers a 4-1 lead, and you're going, no, I can't believe it. Too good to happen. But the Cubs are going to fight back. They hit in the top of the sixth. Cody Bellinger hit a 2-run blast to make it 4-3. The Brewers would get one back when Mark Leiter Jr., who struggled, like I said, walked Yelich, who stole second, advanced to third on a throwing error by Gomes. Willie Adames hits a sac fly to put the Brewers up 5-3. But Yan Gomes ties it up in the top of the eighth with a 2-run mammoth home run. And everybody's excited, but unfortunately, Vic Caratini hits a mammoth home run of himself.
I mean, that was a no doubter. I mean, he absolutely, positively blasted that ball. I mean, never a doubt.
No. And I don't know why Victor Caratini turns into a freaking all-star every time he faces the Cubs. Apparently he's still angry about that Yu Darvish trade. I don't know, but he keeps doing it to the Cubs. And so that's, Michael Fulmer is the one that gave that home run up. Cubs had no more comebacks left in them as they would lose 6-5. Like we talked about at the top of the show, man, an absolutely entertaining week of baseball. But unfortunately for the Cubs, they gained no ground at a point in time where they really got to start doing something if they don't want to become sellers.
Right. And a little added value to the podcast, Crawly. I just saw a tweet. Stroman said he's not sure if he'll even attend the All-Star game. He is definitely not going to be pitching in Seattle.
Yeah. So, it's I think that the Brewers have a lot of confidence, and you look at this team, and it's funny because you said who earlier, and you could say this about a lot of these guys, but they keep finding a way to win. And every time I watch the Brewers, and I keep saying this, I think that Craig Counsell's the best manager in the NL Central, and I think he's far and away better than David Ross is.
Yeah, I have to agree, even though I don't want to agree because I don't like Craig Counsell. He doesn't do much for me. I just find him to be a whiny bitch, for lack of a better term, most of the time. He's always got the bitter beer face going. Just not a fan of the guy.
Yeah, but he sure knows how to coach it. And like I said, this is a team. You look at these guys and look at what they're doing. So
one other thing we should probably include is that no Dansby Swanson in that game either.
Correct. So no Dansby Swanson. And so
I wonder, does Dansby Swanson play in New York? Does Dansby Swanson also not go out to the All-Star game? Something to absolutely keep an eye on. You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is season number 2. It is episode number 50. And in this part of the podcast, Crawly interviews Greg Huss from Northside Bound to discuss the current state of the Cubs farm system.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, we have Greg Huss from Northside Bound. Greg, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm glad to be back on. I know we had some trouble organizing this because we had storms down here and had a bad power outage for quite some time. So I'm glad I'm finally able to hop on and talk prospects. That's what I do. I talk prospects, so might as well do it here.
Right. You do that for Northside Bound, and you guys kind of did something that was really fun. It was called Prospect List Week. Tell everybody that may not be familiar with what you guys do over at Northside Bound. What's Prospect List Week?
Yeah, so over at NorthsideBound.com, that's we cover Cubs prospects. That's the only thing we do. We cover a lot of Cubs prospects, and it's co-founded by me and then Greg Zumak and Todd Johnson, as well as Jimmy Nelligan back in the day. And then we brought on a couple other writers and photographers and the whole squad. So we cover Cubs prospects. That's what we do. And this past week, last week, we did our mid-season updates of our prospect lists. So we kind of wanted to hit on updating those lists right as we led into draft season. Drafts coming up this upcoming weekend. But we wanted to update our list and we figured the way that we look at it is between me, Todd, and Greg Zumak. We all look at prospects in different ways. You know what I mean? Like I value something in a prospect differently than what Todd does. And so we kind of all wanted to put together our individual list, and we did that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of last week. And then we came in behind that and did kind of our cumulative list. We gave scoring, we gave points for all of our rankings, and gave a Northside Bound cumulative list on Thursday. And then on Friday, I put together, it was a fan-driven, fan-created prospect rankings, which was really fun. Basically, I gave fans everywhere the opportunity to vote on who they would rank higher as far as prospects go. and it spit out basically it's your favorite prospects. And we got over 70,000 votes on that fan driven prospect list. So it was a week full of lists, that's for sure.
And so I wanted to talk to you about your list right here because, we're kind of, I guess at the major league level, we're starting to wonder buyers and sellers. And this kind of gets to a point. If you are, I don't know if they're going to be buyers, to be honest with you, but if you are a buyer, these are the prospects that people are going to be these are the lists, same type of list that people are going to be going over to see who they want to trade. If the Cubs, were interested in trying to pick up somebody with, postseason experience or a big name player. So when I look here, you divided it up into tiers, correct?
Yeah, I did, which was important because I think that I feel like people take too literally the difference between a guy ranked 7 and ranked 8 or whatever it might be. And it's like, really, I would listen to arguments within these tiers I created. I think I went 6 tiers, I think is what I did. Within those tiers, I would listen to any argument of a player ranked, say 26 versus a player ranked 18. If you think that the 26th ranked player is better than the 18th ranked player, fine by me. I'm not going to argue too much. I'll listen to what you have to say. It's important to keep in mind those tiers, not necessarily just like 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 40. You know what I mean?
Right. And so, I mean, I think there's very little dispute over who's number one in the eyes of pretty much everybody. And that's PCA. The question now, because he's going to be playing in the futures game coming up during the All-Star break, is does PCA get promoted after, say, the futures game?
Up to Iowa?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if I was betting, I would bet, that his time, once he hits the futures game, his time in AA is up. I think that we probably see him assigned to AAA Iowa coming out of the futures game. I don't have any background knowledge of that. I haven't talked to anybody who's told me that. I think that seems like a pretty logical step for him to go up to AAA after that game.
And what do you think he's done this season that impressed you the most so far compared to last season?
I think what's impressed me the most with PCA is that he's continued to do what he did last year, right? So last year it was that power that he was showcasing that we really didn't expect to see that power at all when he came into the Cubs system. And so he showcased some power down in Myrtle Beach and down in South Bend, his first full season with the Cubs system. And we were kind of entering this season. We're like, all right, is that legit? Like, is that really going to continue? Or is that just kind of an anomaly? What are we looking at with PCA? And it's continued on this year. And that's super, super important. I think that's a huge element in like making sure that he is not just that. I mean, I say just, but not just that Gold Glove caliber defender in center field. Like he's a bat to go along with it. So it's the fact that he's like proven that pop in his bat is not something that he left back in 2022.
Now, when I take a look at your top tier, your tier 2, those are looking more at the top 100 guys. And I remember when Kane Horton was drafted, there was a lot of people that were unhappy with that draft pick. But the more he pitches, the more and more he's starting to change people's minds.
Yeah, dude, honestly, this is kind of perfect. Like talking about Cade Horton here as the draft is getting ready to happen. And we know the Cubs are going to draft somebody on Sunday and fans are going to freak out. Like they're going to be like, oh, this is the worst pick in the entire world. It's like, we don't know. Like we can't say that within 5 minutes after the Cubs drafting a first rounder that he's an awful pick. Like we can't say it because that's what happened last year, right? People went out and said that Cade Horton was the worst pick ever, that they were looking at his ERA. They looked at his college ERA from last year and said, oh, this is a guy that had a 4.5 ERA or a 5 ERA or whatever he had, and said like he was an awful pick. And it's like, man, if the Cubs didn't take him, then the next team was going to take him. You know what I mean? And it's like now he's proving that why like you can't necessarily look at that full ERA as he's coming off Tommy John surgery before he developed that slider, before he was like the pitcher that he is today. So Cade has been incredibly impressive. I have him as my number 2 ranked prospect in the system right now. I think that there's that grouping of Cade and Ben Brown and Jordan Wicks and Jackson Ferris. Those are the top 4 guys for sure in terms of pitching in my eyes. But I've got Cade above all of them. I think he's just really impressed me between the fastball, slider, curveball, changeup. All 4 pitches have been a lot better than what I expected. I guess I expected the slider to be really good. But besides that, all the other ones have been really solid.
Now, you mentioned Ben Brown and Jordan Wicks and some of those guys. Obviously, Cade is in South Bend right now, but Jordan Wicks just got promoted to Iowa, and Ben Brown's been in Iowa for a little bit. Who knows what's going to happen at the trade deadline? Say you do lose Marcus Stroman and they decide to be sellers, or let's, God forbid, even Kyle Hendricks, anything's in there. Who do you see as being, obviously Ben, if you talk about Ben Brown and Jordan Wicks, which of the two do you think makes it up first?
I'm going to go with Ben Brown because he's already 40-man. He's already on the 40-man roster, but and he made it up to Iowa first. But I don't feel real confident in saying Ben Brown over Jordan Wicks. I mean, like you said, they're both at AAA now. They profile super, super different. Like they're different pitchers entirely. Ben Brown is kind of that two-pitch mix guy where he's got a really good fastball and a really good breaking ball. I know he calls him like a separate curveball and a separate slider. But really, to me, it's just manipulating the same breaking ball. I'd have to talk to him a little bit more about the grip that he has with that. But and I think that he has potential to be like a top of the rotation, like a number 2 type guy in a rotation. But he also the floor is way lower with Ben Brown, where like he could fizzle out. He could be like a reliever and a pretty damn good reliever too. But a reliever, where Jordan Wicks, I view him as like a number 3, number 4, number 5 starter long term, and like that, like he just shouts like number 3, number 4 starter to me. So because they're so different, it's hard to like say who's going to be in Chicago first,
Yeah, and so I'm kind of looking at the list, and the one thing that shocked me was when they re-signed Ian Happ. I mean, for a lot of different reasons, but one of them being, I look at your list and how many of these top players are outfielders. You have Kevin Alcantara, who's in South Bend. You have Owen Casey, who's in Tennessee. You're looking at some of these guys. Brennan Davis. Unfortunately, the injuries kind of keep setting him back a little bit. But you still also have Alex Canario, who is back from his stint on the IL from that horrible injury he suffered this winter. What have you noticed about Canario since he's come back?
Yeah, so he's been down in South Bend, and he still has that. It's too soon to tell for sure, right? I think he's still working his way back from injury. He is still down in South Bend on. I don't know if it's technically a rehab assignment or technically just an assignment to South Bend, but whatever it is, I think it's important to keep an eye on that explosiveness because that's what makes Alexander Canario like so impressive. The numbers aren't looking good yet, but it's like I really couldn't care less from a guy coming back from an injury like this. So it's worth keeping an eye on that explosiveness. I haven't seen enough to say yes, it's for sure back, or no, it's gone. It's gone forever. You know what I mean? So too soon to tell on that. But you mentioned like the Ian Happ extension and how it's. I think that even coming from a prospect guy like me, I know you're a prospect guy too. That like I to me, like you extend good players. Right. I could not care less like about like you could have the number one system in all of baseball annually, like every single year. But if you have a good player, like you keep it like, in the major leagues, you keep them on your roster. And then you deal with you deal with the Dodgers issue of the past, 15, 20 years where it's like, all right, once the prospect is major league ready, then you figure out what to do. You deal from your major league roster, you deal from your prospects that are ready, whatever you need to do. But yeah, I mean, I think that Brennan Davis is a good example, right? Where like you're very hopeful for prospects, but you can't bank on them. And that's where I've tried to hit home that point for a decade in covering prospects now, is that you can always be hopeful, you can always be optimistic, but it's just if you're relying on your major league team to like on a guy who's in AA or a guy who's in high A, then you're not constructing your major league team correctly.
Now, I know sometimes you and I have talked about like the highs and lows that come with a prospect, and everybody was clamoring for Matt Mervis, get him up to the big leagues. And, it's hard. I mean, it really is hard when you get up there. And now you don't hear too much about Matt Mervis. How's he doing since coming back to AAA, in your opinion?
Yeah, he's looked good. He's looked good back in AAA. I think that fans did a pretty decent job of like tempering their expectations and not putting Matt Mervis as the savior expectations on him, because that wasn't fair to him. He's going to go through an adjustment period. All prospects go through an adjustment period. It depends on if it's right out the gate. It depends on if they're explosive and then struggle like Christopher Morel did last year. Matt Mervis is definitely too good for AAA. And he's proving that in returning back to AAA after his major league stints. But just because you're too good for AAA does not mean you can't continue to work on things. So he took what he learned from being not quite good enough at the major league level, and he can work on those things specifically down in AAA. And I think that's super, super important.
Now, who would you say that wasn't on your list last year that is on your list this year that really excites you? Who are a couple of guys that all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is a guy right here. We got something here.
Yeah, I think that I'll go with two guys. One that was on my list previously, but has risen pretty significantly, and then one that was not on my list at all, and is now a top 15 guy in the system. First guy is Moises Ballesteros, who I had pretty far. I mean, not pretty far down my list. I was optimistic about him, but he's just been so damn good this year. He's a 19-year-old catcher as of right now, up in South Bend, and what he does at the plate is extraordinary. He is hitting for power. He's using all fields. He is not striking out. He is walking a ton. He looks really, really strong at the plate. It reminds me a lot of what we saw from Owen Casey when he was a younger player. Well, I mean, he's still only 20 years old, but when Owen Casey was down in low A and single A and high A, what he did at the plate, Moises Ballesteros reminds me a lot of that. But he's also not striking out. Owen Casey has always ridden a strikeout rate close to 30%. Moises Ballesteros is down closer to 15%. So really strong performance from Moises Ballesteros. He is now the number 10 prospect in the system in my eyes. Really, really strong. And then the other guy who was not on a list at all, and now he's up to 14, is Jefferson Rojas, who is a middle infielder. He's a shortstop, second baseman, third baseman. He's been managed shortstop for the most part. Down in low A, Myrtle Beach, and Jefferson Rojas looks the part, dude. Like he's 18 years old, but he's kind of built already. I don't know if you got the chance to see him at all, but he's kind of built for an 18. I mean, not kind of. He's definitely built for an 18-year-old. He's built in general, but he looks good at the plate. Pretty fluid at the plate. Like not a whole lot of wasted movement for the most part, and good movements out in the field too. So Jefferson Rojas is a guy who's really, really popped on the radar.
I got to, like I said, when I went to Myrtle Beach, it was phenomenal because I did get to see Jefferson. I did get to see Moises, and I actually talked to Moises a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. And then the other guy is Michael Arias that I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, like you could see so much on TV and feeds, but like I was in like the first row and I'm like watching this kid like just absolutely deal. And I'm like, oh man, this guy's got something.
He's nasty, dude. Michael Arias he's gross. I compared him on my article to Luis Devers from last year in terms of how he popped onto radars, and how his best out pitch is his changeup. But what Michael Arias has that Luis Devers did not have last year is a high 90s fastball, and a pretty good slider to go with it. Right, the command isn't quite as there, but it's gotten better as the season's worn on. Michael Arias is gross, dude. Like he is nasty.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching him play and pitch. It was just phenomenal. And you know, one guy that's on your list that made his major league debut was Daniel Palencia, who you know, just out of, you know, boom, here he is up in Milwaukee, and his first game he's in the extra innings in the 10th and 11th inning. What did you think of that?
Yeah, throwing him into the fire, man. Holy crap. I think that if there's a guy that's gonna take to that pretty smoothly, it'd be Daniel Palencia, and he did. He's just got that closer mentality. Now it's worth pointing out that he was just converted to the bullpen literally a little over a month ago. So this is brand new, and there's a lot of different small things you don't realize that go into that conversion to the bullpen. It's how to properly warm up, how to make sure you're ready at the drop of a hat to start warming up and then get in the game, and you're going back-to-back days, you're going every other day. Your schedule is just a lot different on how you take care of your arm, how you approach getting ready, all that good stuff. And he's still getting used to that. That's still going to take some time, but we know that Daniel Palencia is really, really electric on the mound, right? We saw this week, the fastball in the triple digits. We saw that he has a slider. He has really, really good stuff. And I'm so excited to see him up in Chicago, dude. I'm really excited. I think it's happened way faster than I would imagine. Remember, this guy was in high A last year. He was pitching out of the rotation in South Bend last year. and now he's in Chicago. That's pretty wild.
That's the thing that blows my mind is how quick he went through the system.
Yeah.
And you know, the one thing about your list that kind of made me laugh is your Miguel Amaya. And it was, you know, we've gotten a chance to see Miguel, and it just seems like he plays with a lot of control and wisdom for such a young guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is that, you know, I think a lot of Cub fans would like to see a little bit more of Miguel Amaya.
Yeah, he's always like, even when he was super, super young in the lower levels of the system, he's always been a guy that's way more mature than what his age would indicate, right? Every pitcher that I ever talked to and asked specifically about Miguel Amaya said that they love throwing to him, that they love having him as their catcher. And that goes along with that. That means something, you know, I think that's important. So, yeah, Miguel Amaya has really, really impressed. And I think that at this point, like he's pretty close to being back to like what we dreamed of him being, right? Like when he was in the lower levels, like we dreamed of him being a starting caliber catcher at the major league level. And then he had those injuries. And it's like, all right, well, he kind of fell down list. The expectations kind of fell. But he's like, he was injured for quite some time and he missed that 2020 season. Like it was a rough time for him. And now it's like back where like he's a borderline top 100 guy in all of baseball. You know, he's a borderline top 100 guy. And there's a fine line, dude. Like there's, with catchers, there's such a fine line between a catcher that is a starting caliber catcher and a catcher that is a backup. But the difference is like the value in those two players, a starting versus a backup catcher, is like huge. Like that's like a 3 or 4 win difference. Like I guess 3 win difference in a player, but it's a fine line in their development path. So it's really interesting with Miguel Amaya and with a guy like Pablo Allende farther down the system.
You know, and the other thing that we've noticed is that pairing of Kyle Hendricks with Miguel Amaya. That's got to be helpful for him as well, you know?
I love it, man. I think that is I don't know whose idea it was, but I'm about it. I love whoever's idea it was. I think that makes all the sense in the world, especially with Kyle calling his own pitches. I think that Miguel Amaya did a good job of calling pitches himself coming up through the system and managing a pitching staff. But like, dude, like working with Kyle Hendricks is about as good as it gets.
Right. That's just a totally different education. And you know, the one thing I always keep saying is, you know, it looked like for a while that the Cubs had like, you know, that catcher was a position that the Cubs were really not doing much with in the minors. Now you're taking a look. You mentioned Pablo and Allende. You mentioned, you know, Moises Ballesteros. Now we got Miguel Amaya, and there's a couple other guys too that, you know, it looks like catchers now a position of strength for the Cubs.
Yeah, So I don't know what I don't think I was on your show. I was on a guest spot on a show this past offseason when the Cubs did not re-sign, when they didn't bring back Wilson Contreras. And I was talking about how I was just not surprised at all that they didn't bring Wilson Contreras back. And my thinking was that the Cubs have always loved a catcher that manages a pitching staff that has all those like other qualities besides like hitting the ball hard and playing electric defense and stuff like that. They've loved that, and they have that scattered all throughout their entire system. Miguel Amaya is that guy. Pablo Allende is that guy where he can throw out runners. He plays good defense. He manages, like, players love him in the clubhouse. Bryce Wyndham is a guy in AAA right now that he doesn't hit the ball hard. He's not hitting for hardly any power at the plate, but he doesn't strike out. He walks a decent amount, and he's super, super athletic. He's a freak athlete, and pitchers love throwing to him. Ethan Hearn is a guy farther down, not hitting a lick down in South Bend, but pitchers love him. So the Cubs have been developing this catching system throughout the entire organization that they just love these type of guys. And anything you're getting in addition to that, any offensive output from Pablo Allende or Miguel Amaya is just icing on the cake, really.
Well, Greg, I appreciate you taking some time to hop out there. Where can our readers go online and your website to find more of your content?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find my podcast, Cubs on Deck, anywhere where you listen to this podcast, Apple, Spotify. You can watch us on YouTube, all that good stuff. And then over on NorthsideBound.com, I mentioned the draft is coming up. And we are going to have a live draft show over at the Northside Bound YouTube page. I will not be hosting this year, but my fellow podcast and writing hosts, Todd Johnson and Greg Zumak, will be hosting that live draft show that is happening at 6 p.m. on Sunday night. be sure to tune into that. We can see who the Cubs draft with their first overall pick.
And we'll be looking to see your write-ups. Thanks for jumping on, Greg.
I appreciate it, Crawly.
All right, great job as usual, Crawly. This is Cubs Madness in Milwaukee. It's the Fly the W podcast, and it's season 2. It's episode 50. Let's get into some news, some roster moves, and preview a huge series as the Cubs go out east and take on the Yankees.
Yep, as you just said, Marcus Stroman said he's not sure if he'll attend the All-Star game. And so, that I was kind of surprised to hear that, because it's not like he's been to a whole bunch of them, but he has struggled the last 3 starts out, going back to the game in London, and so I don't know. I just know this about Stroman. I think he probably wants to reset himself and just wants to get away from all distractions. But, I was kind of surprised, because I know he's he really loves he's got a young son. I thought he might, how a lot of the players bring their kids and they're on the field watching the home run derby. I thought for sure that Marcus would, because everyone knew he wasn't going to pitch, right? So because of just the way that the lineups kind of, you're right here, but surprising, so. And we do have some more news as far as the home run derby. That field's set, so we can talk about that in the next episode, see who you like. But it's going to go. It's number 1 seed Luis Robert Jr. from the White Sox against Adley Rutschman. Pete Alonso is the number 2 seed against Julio Rodriguez, number 7. Mookie Betts, number 3 seed versus Vladdy Guerrero Jr., number 6. I thought that was a little low for Vladito, but okay. Number 4, Adolis Garcia versus 5, Randy Arozarena. And I don't know. I've heard this, kind of just swirling around, as if one of these guys drops out, wouldn't it be fun to see what Chris Morel could do in that kind of setting?
Yeah, it would be. It would definitely be interesting to see. But I think, talking about a guy who needs to get a little time off and get reset, I think that's Christopher Morel as well. But I wouldn't hate it if he was in the game. I wouldn't hate it.
You never know with a guy like him if he's ever going to have another opportunity. So it might be fun, and he's a guy that really, loves to put on a show. I just wonder, I think he would do good under the lights. That's my opinion.
Yep. And who knows? Maybe it would be good for him on the flip side. Maybe I'm reading it completely wrong. All right, Crawly, we've got a monster list of roster moves and injury reports. Some of it we've worked in already earlier in the show, but let's give everybody a full rundown here.
Yeah, we got Patrick Wisdom was activated from the 10-day IL. Good to have him back. Nick Madrigal goes on the 10-day IL with a right hamstring strain. It's a moderate strain, unfortunately. Daniel Palencia, as we talked about, was selected from Iowa. Hayden Wierzynski was optioned to AAA, and people are wondering why that was. It looks like they're going to try to stretch him out again, and it looks like he's going to have another crack at starting. So Jameson Taillon better start doing something, because it looks like they may try to be giving Hayden another shot.
They're definitely stretching him out. We had Tommy Hotovy on the other day, and that's what they're doing, no doubt about it. Right.
As you talked about, Dansby was diagnosed with a left heel contusion. We'll see if he has any playing time in New York. Brad Boxberry went to the 60-day IL. That made room for Palencia. And Adrian Sampson is back from injury and assigned to AAA. And I don't know if people remember this. When the Cubs did their huge trade-off in 2021, the very first person traded was Jock Peterson was traded to the Braves for first baseman Bryce Ball. He has been released from the Cubs minor league system. So that is that there.
Thank you, Crawly. Thank you for filling us in on that one. I'm like, wait a minute. Are the Cubs actually going to have another first baseman? Because that is a position that is really a concern for me right now overall, but we don't have time to get into that at this exact moment. All right, Crawly, Cubs at Yankees, going to go see their buddy Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah, the last season, the Yankees finished first in the AL East with a 99-63 record. Aaron Judge had a monster season, 62 home runs, and was named the AL MVP. They beat the Guardians in the ALDS, but were swept by the Astros in the ALCS, and the Astros, would go on to win the World Series. Some big moves for them this offseason. They re-signed Aaron Judge, who was a free agent. There was the worries that he would end up in San Fran. They signed Carlos Rodon, former White Sox pitcher, right, and went to San Fran. Anthony Rizzo, they re-signed again, and right-handed pitcher Tommy Canley. They lost Andrew Benintendi, who went to the South Side, Jameson Taillon, who came to us, unfortunately, right now. DH Matt Carpenter, Chad Green, Aroldis Chapman. They lost Miguel Castro and Lucas Ludic. Remember that weird stuff with Chapman last year that he just basically like quit on the team.
Yeah, he's a strange cat. Obviously he was a huge reason why the Cubs were able to do what they did, but I'd like to scrub him away if that's all possible.
Now the Yankees this year are 48-39. Pretty good record, huh?
You would take that. We would take that here in Chicago.
They are 8 games back
Amazing.
of the Tampa Bay Rays, and they're behind the Baltimore Orioles. So you remember the Cubs did pretty well against Baltimore, so who knows? Maybe they'll do well against the Yankees.
Well, the scary part, Crawly, is that Jameson Taillon is going in game number 1, and as you nicely pointed out, that you can't spell Taillon without an L, and he's going up against Carlos Rodon, who's making his Yankees debut against the Cubs at Yankee Stadium Friday night.
Yep. What else can we say about Jameson Taillon? He's in the last 3 games. He's been charged with losses. He went 5 innings, gave up 4 runs against Cleveland. Against Philly, went 5 innings, gave up 5 earned runs, and took the loss. Against Baltimore, 5.1, he gave up 4 earned runs, took the loss. I mean, that's just what you're getting from Taillon right now, is you're getting about 5 innings, and you're giving up about 4 to 5 runs.
No, it's just not. He's just not getting the job done. That's the easiest way to say it with him.
And with Carlos Rodon, like you said, making his debut, question is he going to be a pitch count? How much? How's he going to look coming out of the gate? So, there's going to be a lot of eyes on Carlos Rodon, making his Bronx debut.
I'm very, very curious about that one. Because that was an argument that David Haugh and I had. David Haugh wanted the Cubs to back up the Brinks truck and bring him in to the north side. And I said, absolutely not. I wanted him nowhere near my Chicago Cubs. And I'm glad that I felt that way.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Game 2 has Drew Smiley on the mound. Like I said, Drew Smiley 7-5, but he's got an ERA of 4.10. But it just, he's only gone 3.2 innings in his last 2 starts. Gave up 3 runs against Milwaukee in 3.2 innings. Gave up 7 runs against Philly in 3.2 innings. He did good against Pittsburgh, but he only went 5 innings, giving up 0 runs, but 3 hits. But it's just like the guy, he's throwing a ton of pitches. He's just not going very deep into games, and it's hurting the Cubs bullpen. So we need this guy to get back on track.
Yeah, this would be a nice night to get back on track. There's no doubt about that in game number 2. And Garrett Cole, awfully tough.
Yep, he got a loss last time out against St. Louis. He went 6 innings pitch, gave up 6 hits, only 2 earned runs. So, the loss, that was one of those losses you can't really blame him on. Against Texas, he went only 4.2 innings, gave up 9 hits, had 7 strikeouts, 1 walk, gave up 3 earned runs. But, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of hits. He threw a lot of pitches, didn't go deep. And then against Seattle, he went 7.1 innings, gave up 4 hits and 1 earned run. So he's a tough customer. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he's tough, and the Cubs have been striking out quite a bit as of late before the Brewers series, so hopefully that's not something they get back into against Garrett Cole. That takes us into the last game before the All-Star break, Crawly.
Yeah, hard to believe that we've gotten this far here, but you got Kyle Hendricks at 3-3 versus 2.64 ERA versus a certain right-handed pitcher who did some special things against Oakland, Domingo Germán. 5-5 with a 4.52 ERA. We know Kyle has been doing really well. He's just he's got the last game against Milwaukee, went 6 innings pitch, gave up 1 earned run. He didn't factor in the decision. Against Phillies, he got the loss, 7 innings, gave up only 3 runs. And then against Pittsburgh, 6.1 innings, gave up only 1 run. So, Hendricks is really doing well, and we're excited to see that. But, the Domingo Germán is one of these guys that just had an unbelievable start 2 starts ago. He had a perfect game, Dustin, against the Oakland A's.
Perfecto.
I know it's, some people say, well, it's Oakland, but you know what, man? It's so hard. That's why it's happened.
They get paid
so
too,
times
right?
in history,
They get paid too.
Right. And then the next time out against Baltimore, he went 4.1, gave up 9 hits, 2 earned runs. A lot of times when you throw a lot of those pitches, we saw that when Kyle Hendricks had the 1 hitter. We saw that when Drew Smiley nearly pitched the perfect game, that the next time out, they just really kind of don't go very deep into games. So interesting to see what kind of start he's going to have against the Cubs.
Yeah, fingers crossed that he does not have the same type of stuff, and he's been enjoying the high life, if you will, from a Perfecto. I saw on social media the wife threw a little get together to celebrate the Perfecto. Had a nice little spread, nice cake, nice drinks, nice food. So hopefully that will take care of it.
Yeah, hopefully, and you know. We got some interesting names on the hot and not. How about Cody Bellinger, man?
Oh, hot, like smoking hot.
He is back, ladies and gentlemen. He's at his last 15 at bats, or last 28 at bats. He has 15 hits, 1 home run, 6 RBIs. Listen to this slash line: 536, 533, 714. That is ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Seiya Suzuki is 6 for 19. So he's slashing 316, 435, 421. Trey Mancini's looking okay. He doesn't have a lot of at bats, only 10, but he's got 4 hits and 3 RBIs. So that's a 400, 333, 400 slash line. So a couple hot guys right now for the Cubs. As far as cold, you end up with a couple guys that, you know, have kind of come up. You're starting to see the league adjusted Jared Young. He's 3 for his last 20 with 2 RBIs and 8 strikeouts. They're throwing him that high fastball, and he's slashing 150, 261, 250. And Mike Tauchman, 3 for his last 22.
Yeah, but the one was huge, so we have to give him a little bit of a break, right?
4 RBIs, but he is slashing 136, 269, 182. But he definitely saved my night last night.
Absolutely. You had a nice night indeed. All right, let's go over to the Yankees. What should we be expecting?
Man, the Yankees, like I said, they look really good. Their center fielder, Isaiah Kinner-Falefa, he's 8 for his last 21 with an RBI. He's slashing 381, 440, 476. And their shortstop, Anthony Volpe, is 8 for his last 22 with 2 home runs, 3 RBIs. He is slashing 364, 364, 727. So be careful with Volpe, please.
Yeah, he's a guy you don't want to be ignorant with. And then in the not category, our old buddy Anthony Rizzo, he's really struggling.
We got a couple of old buddies struggling here, and I was looking at the names, and it was Gleyber Torres is struggling, but yeah, Rizzo is 2 for his last 17, and he's slashing 118, 318, 118. So really struggling. And also former Cub DJ LeMahieu is 2 for his last 18 with a 1 RBI, slashing 111, 261, 111.
All right, prediction time, Crawly. Big 3-game series ahead of the All-Star break. You want me to go first? You want to go first?
Go ahead. You can go ahead and go first.
Well, I don't like these pitching matchups. You always bring this up. I do not like these pitching matchups at all. Now, hopefully, Carlos Rodon is going to be limited. But Jameson Taillon is the opposition. So that I'm not I'm fuzzy on that one. I got to go Garrett Cole in game number 2. And then we have to hope that Kyle Hendricks is still feeling good off his game and Domingo Germain is living high on the hog. So I'm going to say 1 out of 3, unfortunately, Crawly. I only see 1 win this weekend, and that might be game number 3.
I'm with you 100%. Game number 3 is the one that I have the Cubs winning with Kyle Hendricks on the mound. I feel pretty good about that. The others, I don't feel good about at all. And so, it'd be great to get 2 out of 3 and go into the All-Star break on somewhat of a high, but it just doesn't look very likely.
That's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow us on the socials, Fly the W on Facebook, Instagram, and email us, flythew670gmail.com. And you can watch us on YouTube by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. Crawly, have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk early next week and talk a little All-Star break, talk a little home run derby, and talk about the outlook for the second half of the Cubs season.
Absolutely. And, if you can make it there in New York, you can make it anywhere. So let's try to get some wins. Go Cubs. Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!